Hey guys, welcome to another video in my Learning to Program series. In this episode we will be discussing variables. It's not a hard subject, should be pretty easy to get a grasp on it. I hope you enjoy the video. Let's jump right in. In computer programming, a variable is a storage location paired with an associated symbolic name and identifier which contains some known or unknown quantity of information referred to as a value. The variable name is the usual way to reference the stored value. In addition to referring to the variable itself, depending upon the context. This separation of name and content allows the name to be used independently of the exact information it represents. That sounds complicated, but it's not. What happens is when you create a variable in computer programming, you're creating a slot in memory on the computer for a value to be stored in. So you're just kind of like saying, here, I got this value, I want to store it in this variable, set me up a place in memory to store it. And that's what the code will do. Okay, types of variables. There are many different types of variables. The type of variable used corresponds with what type of data you wish to store in the variable. The three we will discuss in this video is string, int, which stands for integer, and float. These three types of variables are heavily used in programming. At least in my world, they're used a lot. The one I use more than any other is string. And this next slide I've set up three different examples of those three variables. So we have string name equals my name, Heath. That string stores a type of value that is of type string, like a sentence. Those are called strings in computer programming. So if I would say, this would all still be a string if I say Heath is a good guy. Inside those quotation marks, that is a string. And now, in that slot in memory, Heath is a good guy will be stored. And it can be accessed through name. That's the name of the variable. And then on int age, we got equals 45. So I'm saying, set me up a spot in memory. The name of it, the identifier is age. The value is 45. Integers store numbers, but not decimal numbers. Whole numbers. Integers can store negative and positive whole numbers. Float is like the integer, except for float can store decimal numbers. You have float and you have a variable type of decimal in C#. But I'm going to discuss float here. They're pretty much the same. There is some differences to them, but not for the scope of this video. So that's giving you an idea of what we will be doing here. I'm going to jump over to the code because it's easier to show than to try to talk about it. Because I don't know about you, but with me, if I see it and then I can sit down and do it myself, I can learn it that way. So I'm going to jump over to Visual Studios and show you some tricks with this and kind of give you an idea of how they can be used. Okay, here we are in Visual Studios. I've got the same three variables set up here. I want to give you an idea of how this is going to work. I have created a console application. And what that pretty much means is when you run the program, it will open up in a console window. So let's just jump right in here, and I'm going to show you kind of how this works with one line of code here. We'll call it console.writeLine, and we're going to say name and we're going to access that variable name, and then we're going to add in more string, and I'll explain what I've done here in just a second. Heath is and then we're going to get the age, but we got to make it the type to string. And I'll explain that too. I just want to show you what this is going to do. Is plus years old. Let's put some spaces between these. And of a height of plus height to string plus inches. Okay, I'm going to come back and explain that in just a second, but I want to run this and show you what the outcome is of this line I just wrote. I've got to write one more line. This keeps the console window open. Without this line, the console window would just open and close real quick. That will keep it open so we can see what the output is. So when we run this, see our outcome there? From what? So it's given the It's given the value of name, which is Heath, is the value of age to string, years old of a height of, and I'm taking the value of height, I'm making it to string, and I'm kicking out inches. I don't have a space there, so we're missing the space, but that's all right. So this is the console window. This is because this is a console project. When we run the program, it opens up in this console window. Now let's talk about what we did here. So this is self-explanatory. This is kicking out the value of that. Now we're inserting another string. Anytime you use the quotes in C#, you're opening up a string. So, and this is, I can't think of the name of that operator. It's right on the tip of my tongue. But it adds to the string. Inside these parentheses, we're using this overload. I'm looking for it. String value. So everything within here, inside those parentheses, is a string. Alright, so age is an integer, and with it, you can't just write out age as a string. If we just put age in it and put this to string, it would give us an error, because this has to be a string within here. But we're using a function that is attached onto the integer class. And we discussed this in the first video about classes. Integer, float, and string are pre-made classes in the C# language. We're like creating an object of string. Like if we made our own class. But this is a class that's already made that's part of C#. So we're creating these objects of each type. So this is a function. I know we haven't covered functions, but we will. This is a function that's pre-made within integer and float. It just casts that to a string. It turns it into a string. It returns the value of the variable as a string instead of its type. I hope that breaks that down so you can understand. So we are adding on to the string, and we're doing the same thing I just discussed here with the integer. And that is just very basic using of the variables. Now let's take this a little bit farther. Now let's do some do some adding here. So let's use name. Let's create another variable. Let's change the name of this variable. Let's make this first name. And we'll say Heath. Let's create another string variable. We'll call it last name. Alright. So as you can imagine, we can use both those now. Now let's do some integer work. Let's say that age int let's call this 10 years. And we're going to say it equals 10. Alright, so let's go with this and let's say console.writeLine let's say Heath. No, not Heath, I'm sorry. First name plus, we're going to put a space in there, plus last name plus Heath Arthur will be and let's add 10 years to my age. Age, let's surround this in parentheses. Age plus 10 years plus, oh, we got to do that to type string, cast that to a string, plus in 10 years. Alright, so what do you think is going to happen when we run this? Let's give it a run and we'll talk about what's happening. So it says Heath Arthur, choosing my first and last name, will be 55 in 10 years. So we can tell the writing out what those parts are. You know, it's just writing out the value of first name, it's writing out the value of last name, writing out the value of will be. But then we got some arithmetic going on here. So we're taking age, now we're using this as math now. We're taking age and we're using the addition of the variable 10 years, which is the value 10. We add those two together and we cast it out as a string and we get 55. Pretty cool, huh? And this is just basics of working with variables. And we can go more and more into this. I'm trying to give you guys an idea of how this works. Let's see. So let's say we could do the same thing with height. We could say float take less height. Do something generic. Less height equals 1.11 float. So now let's write in here the sum, the subtracted sum of height and less height is then we'll take those two. We'll say height subtract less height, and we will cast that to a string. Oh, we got some errors in here. I forgot to add concatenation. Less height dot to string. So we'll cast that to string. We'll run it. So we're subtracting 1.11 off 5.95. And we get 4.84. Same thing as before, but now we're using this subtraction. Height minus less height equals, to string, and then it brings that value out of there. Cast it to string. I hope this has given you a good idea of how variables work. Very simple. Nothing to this really at all. It's just getting it in your head how this stores these values in this memory slot, and you can access them through these identifiers. That's all it consists of. Once you get that, you're on the road to understanding programming, because this is used throughout programming. Throughout every bit of programming, you're going to be using variables. So I hope this has been educational. I hope it's helped you understand this. In our next video, I believe we're going to be covering operators. Like this is an operator. The equal sign is an operator. We will be going over operators because there's a good bit of them. Probably more than what I'm going to cover in a scope of one video, but I want to get some of the main ones out there, and maybe if we get through that, we might go through conditional operators too. So I hope this has helped. I'll see you on the next video. Have a great day.